Hello everybody, I just saw the Donald Trump biopic, The Apprentice, and in this video I'll talk all about it with no spoilers. Although I'm not really sure how you could spoil a movie like this because it's a subject that I assume pretty much everybody watching this video knows all about. Donald Trump is probably the most famous person on earth, and he has been for nearly a decade, so I would be very surprised if someone watching this video didn't know about him or his life. But in this video, I will only talk about real-life events or controversies surrounding the film. I'm not going to talk about specific plot points. This movie was directed by Ali Abbasi, a Danish-Iranian director. I only mention his nationality because I think it's relevant to the film that the director is not an American. He has on multiple occasions stated that the film was not made with any intention of telling you who to vote for or have any real effect on modern politics, considering he doesn't really have a stake in this race. Now, I think the movie's release date may suggest otherwise, considering it's being released less than a month before the 2024 election, but that just might be the case because the distributors would make a lot more money that way. So I don't think Ali Abbasi is being disingenuous the way a lot of people seem to think he is. He says the real intention of the film was essentially to humanize a person who people talk about as if he's from another planet. But it also definitely does not portray him in the most flattering way. One of the producers, Dan Snyder, helped fund the movie under the impression that it would portray Trump in a positive light, but since seeing the film, he has helped Trump pursue legal action against it in an attempt to prevent the film from being distributed. I'm not an expert on Donald Trump's life during this period, but since seeing the film, it seems like any inaccuracies to real life are pretty minor and were essentially assumptions you could easily make about the people portrayed in the film. The scene in the film that Trump seems to be the most offended by is based on a real-life court deposition that his wife gave under oath during their divorce in 1990. I want to quickly talk about the responses to this film that I've seen on both sides. Obviously, Trump supporters like Dan Snyder were not pleased with the way that Trump was being portrayed. Seriously though, how do you mistakenly fund a movie like this? Was Ali Abbasi like, hey, I want to make a movie about who Trump really is, not how the media portrays him, but a human being? And then Dan Snyder was like, yeah, that sounds perfect, here's a bunch of money. And then saw the movie and was like, that's not what I wanted, this is historically accurate. Why didn't you release the Snyder cut? Seems like Ali Abbasi learned a lot from The Art of a Deal. But this is all to say that Trump supporters really don't have the right to be mad at this film for being inaccurate, because it isn't really. And on the other side, I've heard a lot of people complain that this movie isn't bold enough or humanizes someone we shouldn't before a very important election. I would say that I would have liked if the movie were a little longer and more in depth. It really only goes through a bit more than a decade of Trump's life. It's like 1973 to about 1986, I think, and when the movie ended, I kind of wanted to see more. I wanted to see where it would go after that. It's kind of weird to make a biopic about someone while they're running for president. So yes, I would have liked a movie that goes a little more in depth on this guy's chicanery, but this movie wouldn't have worked if it were just a Wikipedia list of every bad thing he's ever done. It's made with the intentions of putting the viewer into the experience of a person who we've all been essentially characterizing as the devil for the past 10 years, and get an understanding of how his psyche works while also criticizing the way he operates. It was kind of interesting to me to see him act like an actual human being. It's fascinating to see him in this light. The way he interacts with his parents and his siblings and his wife, it's just a side of this person we never see. And there's a point where we actually see him cry, and I was thinking about how weird that is, to see him actually express any vulnerability. But this is all to say I have close to no sympathy for this character. I mean, he's still Trump. It kind of reminded me a bit of a Scorsese movie, like Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, King of Comedy, Goodfellas, Casino, Wolf of Wall Street. These are all movies about how America can kind of create deranged people through rewarding immoral behavior. And while I hate pretty much every one of these protagonists, like they're all evil, you do understand them, and you can likely recognize a bit of yourself in all of these characters, even if that piece of yourself is one that you would never let escalate to the extent of these films. That was pretty much the goal of The Apprentice, and it pretty much just studied what turned Trump into the person he is today. I've been defending this film a lot, so why don't I start getting into my criticisms. My main problem with The Apprentice was the pacing. The first half of the movie was a little slow for me, but the second half felt way too quick and kind of rushed. Like I said, I would have preferred a longer, more in-depth film presented in this way. I wanted a longer movie like Wolf of Wall Street or Goodfellas, which it definitely reminded me of, but I think one of the differences between those films and this one is how they pace out their scenes. Goodfellas and Wolf of Wall Street have many great little scenes and sequences that are funny on their own. Everybody remembers the helicopter day or the Quaalude trip. The Apprentice's presentation was getting the job done in terms of telling the story of Trump, but it didn't really spend much time dramatizing single events or days in the same way. This guy has pulled so many weird and funny stunts over the years, and he's still doing it now, so I feel like this movie needed a scene to really bring out the comedy of one of these events. It's a very funny movie at times, but they're usually just one-off jokes. There were some stabs at Trump or explanations for his behavior that were kind of unsubtle and on the nose in a way that's very movie. They heightened some aspects in a way that might have been a little too over the top, like they recreated an interview with Roy Cohn and they exaggerated his HIV symptoms to a point where it was kind of ridiculous. A lot of these elements were actually pretty funny though.
I'm planning on making it the best and the finest building in the city, maybe the country, in the world. Judy, in the world, it's going to be the finest building in the world. It's going to be a spectacular hotel.
The film uses some very 70s filming aesthetics for the first half, lots of grain, handheld, and even some crash zooms, and some very 80s filming aesthetics for the second half, less handheld, more of a cheap 80s digital look. I thought this was a great idea, but I also think it was a little distracting at times, and I did really prefer the 70s visual aesthetic. There's a scene between Roy Cohn and Donald Trump near the end of the film that I don't think ended up being as dramatic as the filmmakers intended. Speaking of, I need to talk about the two leads. Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong are easily the best parts of this movie. Sebastian Stan didn't really do a Trump impression with his vocal tone, which was kind of distracting for me at first, but I ended up thinking it worked in the movie's favor. I honestly don't know if I could handle 2 hours of a Trump impression. Also, 1973 Trump and 2024 Trump are obviously very different people, so I think it's good that his voice reflects that. There were also some parts near the beginning where I was kind of like, this guy doesn't really look like Trump. But then by the end, they aged him a bit, and I was kind of taken off guard by how much he did look like Trump. His posture and mannerisms and all the makeup, it just all worked together perfectly. The whole team did a great job. Overall, I really enjoyed the film and I plan on seeing it again. It's not perfect, but I would recommend it to anyone interested. I'd give this film a 3.5 stars out of 5, which is a very positive rating for me. And if you live in America, please vote. That's all I have to say. See ya.